Hello, welcome. I'm excited to be here to be in conversation with Melanie Stevenson, who is a friend of mine and an author, and I would say in her recent novel, an activist author, really doing good work in the world to bring awareness to various important issues. In this case, one about human trafficking. We will be talking about her upcoming novel. And Melanie was featured recently on actually today's episode of the Connect podcast, episode 45. And I'm really excited for you to hear her story. You can go to anywhere that you listen to podcasts to hear more about her past and her experience as a mom, as a homeschool mom, and also in sharing her creativity through various forms of art. And so I'm going to admit her once she comes on live. Got a few other people joining. Hello, and hello, thank you, Joseph. Welcome from India. And here we are. Hi, Melanie. If you want to just request to join, I will add you to the conversation. There we go. I'll actually just request.
Hey,
Hey, Melanie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Are
Okay.
you in Cambridge? Are you at the cottage?
No, I am at the cottage, so I'm really hoping that you'll be able to hear me okay and we won't get blocked out. I might have to go outside if worse comes to worse.
Well, you're fine right now, and we'll just play it by ear. That's the fun thing about these beautiful Instagram live chats. We can just go with it, go with the flow. People know.
Yeah, okay,
And I
good.
was just letting everyone know that your podcast is up today, episode 45 of the Connect podcast with Sheila Botelho. And I'm just so grateful that we got to share your story because it's really powerful to see how, as you've said, you're a self-proclaimed introvert, and yet you are building a platform to reach people and reach people's hearts about causes that are important to you, and also about faith, about comfort and peace, especially during this past year. You've helped a lot of people navigate a lot of different emotions. And so, why don't you start by just telling me what has this year been like for you as you had your book, One More Tomorrow, and your devotional Soul Focus, focused on trials, which was very appropriate for this year? How was it having those out in the world and talking about those? What kind of feedback have you been getting from your readers?
Well, I think like for an author, I think that's one of the unexpected marvels about putting a book out, hearing back from readers about how it impacted them and kind of some unlikely parts or things. One of the things with the One More Tomorrow book that really made my heart swell was that most of the people that read it said they couldn't put it down and that it kept them up at night, that kept them reading into the wee hours. And of course you want that in a book, you really do. But as I was writing it, of course I wasn't really thinking that per se. I was just telling a story that I hoped would be meaningful and that some of the themes would resonate with others. And of course, when they do, and when people say that, oh, this part, or I could completely relate to this character, or things like that. Because in the book, I do, deal with a few issues that are common to most of us, and kind of, go in and discuss, and through the characters working them out, I think you find a piece of yourself working out. And even if it isn't the exact same issue, I think
Mm-hmm.
often fiction allows us this wonderful thing of, you know, oh, I get to experience alongside the character, but I can relate it to my specific experience. It may not be identical, but it's close enough that, as human beings, we're intelligent enough to, spill it over into our own lives. So it's been that was one of the really cool things, was getting feedback from people. I would get Facebook messages or different Instagram messages just saying, "Oh, I just read this part," or "Oh, I couldn't put it down." And so I really, really appreciate those kinds of messages. I guess in some ways it wasn't ideal putting it out. Who could have known not one, but two books, right? Right as COVID turned in the new year. But so that, presented some challenges with being able to go out and speak about it in person and things like that. But overall, being an introvert is not a terribly bad thing. But yeah, it's been a fun year.
Well, I'm really glad that you launched it in the autumn of 2019 because you were able to do a live book launch. And I was able to be there and hug you and see all the people who were excited for this work you put out into the world. And also to hear you reading excerpts and talking about the experience of writing the book. It was a really beautiful event. And I would say also the beauty of having something like that devotional to go through this year. I had talked about on the podcast with you about your Beaver Dam chats, when you were at the cottage and you were reading every day for a week from your devotional for people who like they wanted to hear, okay, how are we going to get through this time? It's been a challenging time for all of us, and especially now just having yesterday heard in our region that there is a stay-at-home order for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is probably true for other people who may be listening elsewhere already. So knowing that there's things that we can read that will encourage us and give us hope is so, so beautiful. And I would love for you also to share about what is this holiday season that we're just coming out of? What has that been like for you, knowing that you finished writing your third book and then being able to rest after doing
actually, I had an amazing fall because as soon as my 12-year-old went back to school on September the 8th, that was my start date. Mm-hmm. And, during the last year, during COVID and whatnot, I had this unexpected privilege of having my big kids back. My married son and his wife and grandson, newly born grandson, we all hunkered down at the cottage together. And then sporadically came the next two kids. And so unexpectedly, I had that time and I didn't want to use it up, tucked away writing the book, even though, so many people said, oh, this is a great opportunity to write that novel that I had been talking about, for 2 years. And when she went back to school, I was like, okay, the house will be empty. I'll be able to just, put all my time toward it. And I remember reading Stephen King's book on writing.
I loved that book. It was so good.
So good. And he was like, I think he writes 2,000 words a day. And I didn't put that as my goal, but I think on the first day I wrote something crazy like 4,000 words because I had been sitting on this book for 2 years. I had been writing notes about it, percolating, really discovering who these people were. And so it just spewed out and it continued that way. Like I wrote not every single day, but almost every single day, unless I had a priority with my family or I was, taking a day off. But because of that, I didn't lose the momentum or the flow and managed to write this book. I think in how many days was it? 50 days or I don't know.
Incredible.
It was great. And so anyway, I finished it in mid-December, I think it was. And that was that. I said, I'm sitting on this and I won't start my first edit until after Christmas. So I'm just 20 pages away from my first edit, which I began last Monday. And then I'm going to send it off to some people who know about human trafficking and this kind of thing so that they can give me their goods on what things maybe need to change or how I could make it better that way.
Well, tell people who they haven't listened to the podcast yet, perhaps, probably most people haven't quite yet. It dropped at like 12:01 Eastern time. So people are working and doing stuff. So tell us, what is the premise of this book? Do you have a working title?
No, I have a list. I thought I knew, but there's a very similar book out that has the same title. So I guess it's a good title. But so now I'm throwing around different ones. I haven't settled yet. So, but the book is basically following the journey of a young girl whose parents pass away. She's only 12 years old. And I won't tell you how because I don't want to ruin everything, but that
Mm-hmm.
thrusts her into a life of abuse and eventual human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're following basically the things that have precipitated her having to survive, and how she manages to do so, and how she manages to get out. So don't want to spoil it for you, but
Right.
yeah. And when we were talking earlier about One More Tomorrow, my first novel being, a page turner, I guess, having from the mouths of other people, this one
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, and I was sure that it was going to be that, just because the plight of this girl, like, as it was a hard book to write,
Mm-hmm.
because you almost have to feel well, you do, sadly, in some cases, have to
Yeah.
feel the way your character feels to be able to authentically write.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was some dark days in there where I was like, whew, came out of my writing room and was thinking to myself, wow, like this is hard. But the way I've written the book is in a way that gives you the reader breaks. Like I've written them in the two locations, and I write from present day to basically her past, so we can line it up together. So there
Mm-hmm.
are lovely breaks and beautiful bits, and even
Mm-hmm.
in the hard stuff there's some beauty. So anyway, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, and you had spent some time in Cambodia with Ratanak International,
Mm-hmm.
uh, dealing with who basically this is their focus, human trafficking, and
Mm-hmm.
so that is where the inspiration for this book originally came from. How long ago did you go to Cambodia?
So I went there like, I think it's 12 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was saying in the podcast, that was my first introduction to the horrors of human trafficking. And when I came home, I was like, how can we do something about this? So, I began to learn a bit more domestically what that looks like. And
Yeah.
it is, of course, happening here within our borders as well. It looks a little different. But, in learning more about it and learning about the things that precipitate it, like, there's issues with poverty, there's issues with childhood abuse. Different populations in Canada suffer more heavily from it, and um, definitely your family life. So there are markers, although not always. Like, we can't say that it's just across the board, but we do know that there are some things that make it more likely. And so I have, in formulating my character for this book, I was making sure to line that up as well in why, how does this happen? And the
Mm-hmm.
whole purpose behind the book was really to just let people know, sometimes you see a person in society who maybe has addiction, or maybe anxiety, or maybe they're dealing with what you may not recognize as post-traumatic stress,
Yeah.
and you can easily judge them
Mm-hmm.
because you're just seeing the outward behavior, but you don't know what has led up to that behavior. And so what this book is, what I'm hoping is, when we see women or men in society who are behaving a certain way that maybe seems disagreeable or even preposterous from our background, or when we see a segment of society who, you know, um, isn't able to cope, and we think, well, why can't they just pull themselves together?
Yeah.
In this book, I'm showing that someone who has been abused as a child and who has been trafficked have been treated in such a tragic way that their coping in society is so much more monumental than, say, you or I, who may not have
Mm-hmm.
experienced such a thing, or other
Mm-hmm.
people who would maybe easily judge them for, behaviors of lying, or of not being able to show up at a job, or things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to just really create a character who could be that girl that maybe lives next door to you and you wouldn't have known. Maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
your student in your classroom who's
Mm-hmm.
not doing her work anymore, and she really couldn't care less to be there. And she's
Mm-hmm.
actually terrified if you call her into her classroom to have a simple discussion with her. And I really wanted to outline why that would be the case. And could we just be a little gentler? And could we just be a little more patient? Could we just give someone so many more chances than we might give somebody else, because we don't realize what's going on under the surface, and we rarely look. So
Yes. Oh, that just gave me shivers. That is so impactful, so powerful. And really, what you're saying is, how can we be more loving? Like, what does love really look like in our everyday circumstances? And it's true, we are looking at other people and other experiences through our own past, our own experience, but to actually stop and ask the questions and get to know and
Mm-hmm.
tread a little bit lightly, knowing that they could have experienced something completely different than, many of us who may have lived very sheltered lives.
Right.
And where we met at church. We share a Jesus faith. And I love that everything you do stems out of that. And we're all on this path, this journey of how do we live this out? How do we live
Mm-hmm.
out the love that we're called to? And it's challenging. It's challenging, especially when you do see people who are completely on the other spectrum of where you are and volatile, perhaps hostile. How do you respond?
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully I know this book is going to make such an impact for so many people in how to better connect with other people, people who are different from them or people that they just don't know. So thank you
Yeah.
for writing it. And I imagine now that I think about it, it would be very, very difficult to write a book like this. And yet I was following along in your Instagram stories each day. I love how you would write, I've read this many words, and then all the other neat little things about your day that you got to enjoy as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And like I said in the podcast, including like some awesome desserts at time, which was great. And you always looked so fulfilled and joyful that you had completed it, that it's, another thing to imagine, well, but what emotions did you have to go through getting into the character? Because writing nonfiction where it's just facts and statistics and numbers, which those
Mm-hmm.
can move us too, if depending
Yeah.
what the statistics are about, but writing a story, I mean, we think about how we feel when we're reading or watching a movie. We just depart right into that piece of
Mm-hmm.
art. So it's incredible. And I love that you have the space to be able to do these things. And you waited a while to publish your first book, and now like to really just be on your trajectory to keep writing. And it's very evident that it's meant to be for you to be writing because it brings you so much joy,
Mm-hmm.
and people, the messages are landing. So that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So now, I guess the other thing we do talk about in the podcast is your homeschooling journey, many years
Mm-hmm.
of homeschooling, like 18 years.
Yeah.
What what kind of encouragement do you have for the moms and dads that
Mm-hmm.
are home now,
Yeah.
forced home to be overseeing their children's learning?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of, how can we give people some grace on themselves during this time?
Yeah, I bet you could speak to that really well as well, but I'll offer my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I think one of my uh, one of the disadvantages for me that I always want things to be perfect. I'd like the world to be perfect. We don't live in a perfect world. I'd like to be perfect. I make mistakes, and so I would say be gentle on yourself. Recognize that you have limitations. There's going to be days where not as much gets done, and people aren't as in a productive mood as they might otherwise be, or you're tired. And so I would say, like, try and go easy on yourself through the process. And definitely, if you've been thrust home and you didn't choose to be a homeschooling mom or dad, I would say that that's tricky, right? Because now you're having to learn a whole skill set that you didn't choose or really want imbued on you. So I would say be extra patient on yourself and your kids, because this is going to be a learning process, and is a learning process for you and them. And yeah, and then I would just say your kids are going to learn. Even if you're doing something, your kids are learning. And so, like, if that day wasn't great, don't chalk it up to being like, oh no, my kids are going to fail. Like, we didn't do this or that. Or, you know, again, human beings do learn. They learn in different ways at different speeds, and the things that they're interested in learning are a huge force of motivation. So there's things we must learn, and then there's things that, if you could fuel the fire for your kids and give them some things that they're extra interested in, you'll get more out of them. So yeah, do the things you have to do, but maybe insert some lovely things that are a bonus for them. That, you know, if they like writing, let them write longer. If they like drawing, let them draw longer. If they like researching, let them research longer. And so those would be a few of my tidbits, I guess.
I love that. Yeah. I would add to that that if things just aren't working, now I get it. There are some students who are, you know, depending on the age, depending on what the school is doing, they're like needing to be in front of the screen with their teacher for X amount of time, which there is some ease to that because it's like, okay, I'm used to having my teacher in front of me. But then in terms of some of the other things, it's like if you're, like I've always said to my kids, if they're working on an assignment or an essay or whatever, and their energy is just gone and they're reading things over and over, it's just not worth it. So take a step away, go outside, do something that fills you up, put on some music, have a dance break, whatever it is, have some food if you have teenage boys. Eat, please eat a lot, because that will help get the hangry out, you know. And then go back to it when you're feeling like you've got the energy, or hey, sleep on it, go back to it the next day. Certainly being in class with the teacher online, you need to be there. But the thing that we need to remember too is if someone's not feeling well, like physically not feeling well, if they weren't feeling well, especially now, they'd be staying home from the school. So you know what? There are a lot of accommodations you can make in that way too, so that people are actually experiencing things in a more positive way. So yeah. And
my
what are
thing
the
too is go ahead.
Oh no, please.
One of the things that I used to think too was that, you know, if you're learning and like you were saying, it's not working, try something else, you know, pivot. And the example I would often give is my son, my second born, did not learn to read like my firstborn. My firstborn learned to read like breathing. My second born was he just wasn't picking it up. I was doing all the same things and it wasn't working. And I was thinking to myself, why isn't it working? And my end goal, like this is where I'm coming to with any parent. What is your end goal in your child's learning or your child's character? Think on those things and then work from there. So pertaining to reading, my end goal is I don't want my child to hate reading. I want him to love reading. He hates reading right now. He's crying. How am I going to get... So I ditched the curriculum. Just got rid of it, put it away. Said that we're not doing this year. And I said to him, you can read anything you want. You pick. So that whole year, he read mostly Henry and Mudge books. I think he was in grade 2. And maybe the Magic Tree House after that. But he bought the whole set. And that's all he read. And he read them over and over again, out loud and everything. And guess what? That boy reads so much now. He's a 22-year-old, and he's constantly researching and reading and finding things out. And so we reached the goal. The goal was to be able to read well, to comprehend what you're reading. And who would have thought that ditching the curriculum would accomplish that? But it did. So
I love it.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I have a similar story. My oldest, probably because I had all the time in the world when it was just he and I, we would read every single morning like clockwork, and every single night before bed, my husband and I would read with him. And then he would memorize books, and then just reading he was reading the newspaper by the time he was 5. So I had to hide the newspaper sometimes because there weren't great articles in there, you know, it's like, Mom, what's this mean? You don't need to know about that right now. And then my youngest, we always read, like we loved to read aloud as a family every night. And until recently, which we need to pick up again. We just like this year kind of got us off track, but to sit and read himself, he had too much creativity in his mind. He wanted to picture it. So he'd look at the pictures and be like, oh, write the words. And then so he loved being read to. And then it took him a while as well to be able to read on his own. But now, because I was like, okay, let's make it fun, same way you did. What do you love to read? Let's read that. Now I go downstairs in the morning on a weekend and he's reading a history book. It's like, Mom, did you know? And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm learning so much from him from history because he really enjoys that subject. So it's true. We all learn on a different timeline. It's very true. And just
Yeah.
like you or I and any other adult we know, some people love reading, some people like listening to audiobooks. And that's
Yeah.
actually a question. Are you going to have any of your books on audio?
I don't have plans for that right now, but I do love the idea of it, especially as we talk about, having read aloud to our kids all these years.
Yeah.
I love the idea of someone being able to access the book that way. So it's something that I probably will look into, but not, I haven't done yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a wonderful way for people to access. I think that's why I love podcasts so much too. I love to read,
Mm-hmm.
but I love to be able to listen while I'm doing other things also.
Yeah.
Probably for a book, I like a novel, a fictional novel, especially like I will want to sit and just read because
Mm-hmm.
to listen, yeah, I like to be in the pages. So, oh, this is
Yeah.
so good. So before we let you go,
Yeah.
well, first of all, when is your latest book
Mhm.
due out?
I don't have a time for it yet, but I would suspect that the editing process will be half a year. I'm not sure. So I would like to say within the year, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll be staying tuned. And again, like I said, we'll have you on the podcast again. You and I
Thank
discussed
you.
to promote that. And for people who are listening, the other two books are available wherever you can get books. You can get them online at Indigo, Amazon, and curbside pickup. I'm sure at any bookstores that are carrying them. So the novel is One More Tomorrow, and then the devotional is called Soul Focus, both by Melanie Stevenson, and you'll be able to grab those. And before we go, I'm curious to know what beautiful, healthy rituals are you partaking in up at the cottage now with your family? What are some of your favorite little things you're doing together?
Well, there's been some tobogganing for sure. And we have, I think everybody has a set of snowshoes. So, but even if they don't want to go with me, I try and get out like several times a week for a snowshoe. And I brought my yoga mat. So I'm doing my own little routine for about 35 minutes or so a day. And what else are we doing? Well, we're planning on having an outside fire, so that'll be fun to just sit in the snow. And there's been a bit of snowmobiling too. Um, One of the snowmobiles did pretty much catch fire though
Oh
yesterday,
no.
so that was in a bit of excitement. But we're working on fixing that. Yeah, but no, there's a lot. There's been some games. Everybody's up here right now, so
Oh,
that's
great.
unique and marvelous. For Mom's Heart, you're just like, wow, you don't really get these all the time anymore. So this has been
Yeah.
great. My grandbaby's been toddling around here too, so that's been awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. I'm so happy that you have been able to spend so much time together. And again, it speaks so much to the family ethic that you basically designed, you and Ralph designed for your family. And what home educating can result in is
Mm-hmm.
close family ties, depending on how you go about it. And it's always inspired me over the years. And I'm happy to say I love that I have a great connection to my kids still too. As they're teens, these are
Mm-hmm.
definitely different days to be
Yeah.
navigating being in your teen years, just like it is being in any year of
Yeah.
living.
Yeah.
But that relationship, we realize during these times, our relationships are just so crucial, and
Mm-hmm.
investing and pouring out time into them is of utmost importance. So thanks for
Mm-hmm.
modeling that. And I send lots of love to you and to the family. And
Thank
I
you.
really look forward to a coffee date in person
Yeah.
sometime. I can't wait.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, let's hope that can happen sooner than later, but I don't know. We just have to keep our chins up, right?
That's right. And we'll get through this. And everyone, please follow along the journey with Melanie Stevenson, author, at Melanie Stevenson, author on Instagram. And you'll be able to see for yourself some beautiful posts that give you an idea of her heart and what she's sharing. And Melanie, thank you for sharing your heart today. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it too. Thanks so much.
Have a great day. Bye,
Yeah, you too.
everyone.
Bye.